Hey, and welcome to this new episode of the State of the Net podcast. I'm Paolo Valdemarin.
And I'm Ewan Semple. And you can tell it's a sunny day because Paolo started the podcast going, hey.
Yes, it's one of the last sunny days of this year, probably. But I'm enjoying it very much.
So just before we started, we always do this, don't we? Just before we started, Paolo was telling me about a couple of articles that we thought we could use as the basis for our podcast today. Do you want to just catch everybody else up with those two ideas, Paolo?
Oh, we're going to post the links of the two articles in the notes. The first one that I found this morning is Lawrence Lessig titled Podcasting and the Slow Democracy Movement. And I found it interesting to read this on the day I was about to record the podcast. So the basic premise of the article is that we're coming out of a Twitter period. He says the 2016 elections were the Twitter election, where everything is very quick and very short and very orientated to an advertising rhythm where you just want to catch the attention of people and move to the next things. And we're moving towards a podcast period where everything is slower and more thoughtful, because if you do a podcast, it takes more time, and it takes more time to do it. It takes more time to listen to it. And if it's slower, it's better.
It's interesting because in that article, he linked to Joe Rogan's podcast, which I enjoy mostly, not all of them. And Joe Rogan has talked on occasion about that slow nature. I mean, his podcasts can be anything up to 3 hours long. And I never thought I would listen to that length of stuff on any medium, never mind the internet. And it's funny, though, because just you mentioning or the article mentioning advertising, he starts with must be about 4 or 5 minutes worth of ads. And it's funny because I've learned on my podcast player that if I hit the 30-second fast forward button 5 or 6 times, I'll pretty much hit the start of the podcast. So it's funny how even in that long form, the need to fund it through advertising still persists, but in a way it's kind of easier to dodge. It's not in my face all the time.
Yeah, I think that I wonder if advertiser had figured that out yet.
Maybe we shouldn't have said that. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, well, if whenever we will be looking for advertisers for our own podcast, let's make sure we remove this episode from this. We're sorry, it was lost.
No, we will never. Can I make a public commitment now, Paolo? We will never have advertisers on this podcast.
Well, everybody has a price. Never say never. Who knows? I mean, we might become, once we have several million listeners, maybe there is.
Nope.
No? All right. I'll find somebody else to do it. That is when we will split and I will go commercial. No, I do. I do the same. I mean, I do not listen to very long podcasts, to be honest. I mean, I guess that I can get to 40, 50 minutes if it's very interesting, but then I can't really stay there for longer in terms of attention. I mean, I get bored, I guess, after a while, and unless it's something very, very good.
Of course, you're that younger soundbite generation, Paolo. That's maybe the difference.
Yeah, but way younger.
But I mean, it's interesting because it's not all podcasts that I would listen to for that length of time. But a great bit of news over the weekend that Russell Brand's podcasts are starting up again with a whole new series of sounding like great speakers. And the first one's coming out this week, and you can probably tell I'm genuinely excited. I'm really looking forward to it. And the reason is that I love the chance, and his aren't that long, they may be an hour and a half sometimes, but the chance to hear people thinking hard about stuff. I can hear people at home saying, yeah, unlike this podcast. But but that's what I relish is that opportunity. And it's funny, I was talking to, I was in meeting a friend, BBC colleague the other day there, and we were talking about the role of public service broadcasters like the BBC in the future and funding, and going back to the advertising thing, whether the licence fee is still an appropriate method for making, getting money in to make programmes, and how successful subscription has been in the form of Netflix. And, I think we maybe touched on this in the podcast before, but just I think people's appetite for quality is beginning to reassert itself, and that's possibly part of what's being observed on by Larry Lessig. That, you get tired of being the product, you get tired of being shouted at, and eventually you want to benefit from the stuff you're consuming, and will pay a little bit extra to do so.
Well, one would hope so. I guess that the real challenge is we are just moving groups of people from one part of the media spectrum to the other, and the real question is how many we're moving, in the sense that I don't think that I ever was particularly interested in the clickbaity type of media, but there is a very large group of people out there who are slaves to this system. So yes, people are moving. Podcasts are becoming, finally, if you want, popular, and or at least this what seems to be happening, and it's good because it means that we have more people. It means that some people are moving away from the streams that are the mind controlling streams, but how many? I mean, there will still be people in every part of the spectrum. So I guess the question is how many are moving, and unfortunately in a democracy is a matter of numbers. So when he says that, when he called this a slow democracy movement, I'm happy that there is some people moving. I wonder if we're talking about a majority.
Well, and it's interesting, that reference to slow movement. I'm doing a talk next week in Canada, and I actually took a screenshot of the cover of Larry Lessig's book, Code and Other Laws of Cyberspace. And in doing so, it clocked the fact that it's 18 years since I read that book. And so for 18 years, some of us have been aware of the issues of data and algorithms on our perceptions of democracy. And the other link you were mentioning, Paolo, was the one from Joy Ito. Could you just touch on that one again for other folks?
Yeah, well, he wrote an article for Wired, and it's titled "The Next Great Digital Extinction," and it starts by describing this event that happened on the planet 2 or 3 billion years ago, created a great oxidation event when basically all the forms of life that existed before oxygen had to find refuge at the bottom of the oceans or die out once oxygen became common on the planet. And of course, oxygen enabled a whole new type of life. And he is basically drawing a parallel with the digital revolution and how this is actually forcing on the bottom of the ocean what came before. But he's also talking about the digital, how the digital revolution started in the early 90s in Silicon Valley, and how, I guess, the most interesting part of the article is how he was part of it. But it actually he was, and it was an interesting period. And he kind of finishes saying that the hippies that started the revolution are leaving room for the new generation of warm-blooded mammals that will do much better with these tools than what the hippie generation did. In a way, he's saying the first digital generation somehow failed to obtain the revolution, but it did create the environment for the next thing to appear.
really interesting, isn't it? Because, I was thinking this, again I refer to him as Larry Lessig as if he was my mate, but I have met him a few times. And it is that feeling of having been in, 18 years ago, at that, I guess, second wave of the whole internet thing. Joy was part of the first wave, and then the second wave was the Web 2.0 thing, which got horribly turned into social media and all that came with it. But, you were part of that as well. And we knew most of the people who were active and involved in shaping it. And, it's kind of, it's deeply unattractive to other people to keep banging on about that. But it's interesting. I was just trying to think what the next wave looks like and who are shaping that, what sort of ethics. You were talking before we started about the fact that some of the people on the well were libertarians, and in some ways quite right-wing in their views. And I just find it interesting at the moment to get a sense of where the next iterations come from. And I guess it's in the blockchain stuff, which again, and the decentralization of the web that Tim Berners-Lee is talking about. So, some of the hippies haven't given up yet.
Well, I think that what is interesting is that there is a combination of passion for the new things but at the same time there is a lot of responsibility of humans of why they're doing what they're doing. It's probably almost more important than the underlying layer of technology. So whether it is HTTP or the blockchain, it's why why they are doing this is probably more important, and the motivation, the ideals that there are behind a lot of these movements are interesting. There is a podcast I heard this week, an interview with a journalist that wrote a very long profile of Facebook and of Zuckerberg in particular, who had unprecedented access to Zuckerberg. And tells a little bit of the story of Facebook and how they ended up being this probably not so happy period. And they say, he described how at some point Facebook became completely driven by growth. They would do everything and anything to grow. They got to this point because at some point they hit a ceiling, and I think it was like at 50 million users, they couldn't, for some moments it couldn't grow, and they started saying, okay, we're going to do anything. The most important thing is growing. We'll do anything to grow.
So growing in terms of numbers rather than
growth in terms of numbers.
Necessarily, yeah.
No, growth in terms of we want more users, more engagement, more user, more engagement, more user, more engagement. And the problem is that this led them to make Facebook addictive. They basically, at some point, they realized that they could build into the platform some solutions that were designed to be addictive, and that this would actually help them to grow. And at some point, they thought that it doesn't matter if we grow, everything will be all right. When people are pushing back, is because they don't understand yet. They don't understand what we're doing. What we're doing is unique, and
they don't get it. Yeah,
and they don't get it. And I think they were sincere, having as sincere kind of almost teenager who run a multi-billion-dollar company be. And they ended up being in this place. And man, did you see the new product I just introduced yesterday, the portals?
No.
So Facebook just introduced two new products, which are basically a standing screen with a camera on top that you can use to talk to your friends. It's like a video conferencing thing, and it comes with Alexa. And
no.
And I was thinking, look, I actually totally see the use for this product. I mean, when I'm home, I call my wife, who lives in Italy, and we kind of leave this open video call on, and I move around the kitchen, she moves around the kitchen. It's as if we were in the same room. If I had a better technology to do this, I would probably buy it. but not from Facebook. I mean,
or Amazon. The combination of the two is just, you might as well just open your veins and bleed data into their coffers. I mean, it's just... Geez.
Exactly. I mean, having an always-on product that listens to everything you do, and also the way they frame it, they say, "Oh, we will never listen to your conversation."
Yeah, right.
Well, the thing is, he didn't say we cannot listen to your conversation.
Well, that's like the Home Secretary many years ago saying that law-abiding citizens in the UK have nothing to fear from GCHQ. I wasn't worried until he said that.
Yeah, well, that is pretty much he basically said, he didn't say, anyway, he did not say they cannot listen to it. They just said they will not.
They'll try really hard not to.
That they say, okay. And the funny thing of all is that the camera lens, if you want to protect your privacy, there is a clip-on plastic thing that you can put over the camera lens. That is... I mean, I'm sorry, but it really feels like an afterthought. Like,
It comes with a free roll of gaffer tape.
It's yeah, exactly. It's not something. It's not even part of the box. It is a piece of plastic that most people would lose within 20 minutes from installing the thing. And I mean, I appreciate that.
Brave New World was right, wasn't it? Really.
I mean, look,
we're doing this voluntarily.
They must have been working on this product for a while, and I almost feel sorry for them because I do appreciate that probably they don't think it's going to be very successful either. But
because it's interesting because when you were leading up to the story, given the background and the conversation we've had thus far, I stupidly thought they were maybe doing something responsible and grown up. Wrong.
Yeah, that's not yet. I mean, the next thing that you're going to do is responsible grown up. But this thing, I mean, I guess that this is the last brain fart they had in the pipeline before becoming responsible.
So, it's interesting because, again, anticipating this thing next week, I'm going to try and tread the line between being still, despite everything, an enthusiast for technology. And I love the fact that, that my watch is clever enough to know that if I've been walking for 10 minutes without a break, the chances are I'm on a walking workout, and pops up and asks me to confirm that and then back times the walking exercise to when I actually started. I mean, that is so clever and so cool. And I can cope with that because I still believe that Apple don't actually make any use commercially of my data because they've made such a big thing of that, and that's one of their USPs. I think it's that thing about being aware of the issues, being thoughtful about the issues. And, the pitch I'm going to make to these people in Canada is that if enough of us think hard enough and enough of us use the social tools that we have at our disposal to talk about the consequences of some of this stuff, to keep up to speed and learn about it and make better informed judgments, it might turn out all right. But if we just all blindly tip ourselves over the edge of that cliff into this, mass data dystopian future, then it could be really ugly,
Yeah, I mean, it's all about how big it is going to become. I mean, it's we have these amazing tools, and they're truly making people superhumans if only people are willing to embrace this. At the same time, I bought a second Apple TV for our house in Italy, and I plugged it in, and I installed the basic apps, and I didn't want to log in with my own account on the YouTube app, and waiting for Monica to do that. So, but I started the app anyway, and I kind of had a glance at YouTube, what people watch on YouTube if you're not logged in. I mean, what the public thing, what is popular on YouTube? Because if you ask me, YouTube is all about airplanes, rock music, all the way to 73, cars, and weird tools to cut wood and metals. I mean, that's my image of YouTube. Now, it turns out that they might be slightly personalized, but because actually what is mainstream of YouTube is absolutely crazy. I mean, it's the same type of stupid content that I think is on TV. I don't watch TV, but,
That's interesting, because I, for many years now, have I don't have I have a Google account only so that I can access Google Docs that people send me, pretty much. And the occasions when I do want to specifically watch something on YouTube, and there's a particular combination that it's still worth me having the account for. But I don't. I'm only logged into it for the time that I need to do those things. So still, Google knows really very little about me. I mean, I never tracked my history on the browser. Even with Facebook, I come out of Facebook when I've stopped using it. If I'm in a browser, in fact, I've just taken all the social media tools off my phone. And the only things on my phone are tools that allow me to read books or write. Which isn't me sort of joining in the paranoid, we're all victims of technology thing, because I still enjoy Facebook and I'll still go into Facebook and log in for the time that I'm doing it. But they find out very little about me. Maybe I'm paranoid, but it also increases my kind of the quality of my experience of the thing to some extent as well, because
well, does it? I mean, in a sense, I mean, okay. In a sense, one might argue that you know how you always complain about the fact that you get weird ads on Facebook? Well, that's because you don't allow them to know you. And one might argue that getting advertising that is more related to your sphere of interest is better than getting advertising for stuff that you don't care about.
But that's why I feel that actually it makes it easier to ignore the advertising.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty good point.
I'm not so drawn into it by going, oh look, I have to have one of those things. I mean, there's a bit of it. I mean, to be fair, I'm not completely Snow White on this. I mean, I do get advertised with stuff for climbing hills and things, and notebooks, lots of notebooks. But so that they're not completely unaware of me. But in a sense, I've managed what they get to know about me in a way. So I only ever click on things that I'm genuinely really interested in, for instance.
Oh, but it's true. I mean, in the case of YouTube, I might say that I like YouTube. I mean, I like the way YouTube is showing me stuff that I like, and is not showing me stuff that probably everybody else is like. So it's interesting. I keep to, for example, I've been running Facebook in a different browser. There is a plugin that it might actually be created by Firefox people themselves. You can basically run on Firefox. You can run Facebook in a sandbox. So basically, Facebook is running in a tab, and you can't do anything but running a tab. So I don't care about Facebook. I mean, I don't want Facebook to know on what other sites I go. So I'm not keeping Safari, which is my main browser, logged on Facebook, and I have removed all the cookies. But more in general, I don't like trackers. I mean, forget Facebook and Google. There are tens of other trackers which are harder to stop, and I actually fight them in everywhere I can.
But see, it's interesting because that conversation I had with my former BBC colleague who's still there, and part of the conversation was about the importance to them of getting personalisation right. And at the time, I sort of felt slightly uncomfortable with the way the conversation was going. And then I come home, and my wife Penny goes to use iPlayer, and it now insists that you create a login. And I thought, because part of the remit of public service broadcasting, albeit patronising, was to give people what was good for them, to know what was good for them. And if we all just end up, I mean, that is the concern about echo chambers, isn't it? If we all end up in personalised niches that don't stretch what we know. But I'm falling back into the trap of being victims again, because it's up to us. If we don't like being in a niche, we can always do something about coming out of it.
Well, I think so. One of the companies I'm working with right now is thinking about an AI development, basically machine learning development, and it is around content and personalization. And one of the core ideas that we have been developing is to create a a sort of a manifesto where we basically say everything we will do with data, we will tell you about.
Yeah.
So yes, we want to do this. We want to personalize your experience because we do think that the personalized experience is going to be better. Because our aim is to inform you in 5 minutes, and if I can give you what is better or more relevant and more interesting for you in those 5 minutes, you get the better. You are informed better. So personalizing is good.
Yeah.
But what I don't want to do is do this behind your back.
Yes.
I want to be able to collect as much information from you as I can, because this information, which is not personal information, but the more I learn about what you like and what you prefer, the better I will be able to inform you. On the other hand, I also have professional journalists who will be making decisions for you. There will always be a journalist deciding what is most important. And if I don't care if you don't care about sports, if this is an important information because you live in this society, I will tell it to you anyway. Yep. So striking the balance there is hard. And I think that being transparent about it and being able to share your discoveries and your approach and collect feedback from users is important. And it could be, it's a win-win solution for everybody. So it's not about, there's nothing wrong with personalization, it's how you do it.
Well, I was just checking out an article that I remember there that David Weinberger wrote for Wired, which the title was "Don't Make AI Artificially Stupid in the Name of Transparency." And it's because we could put this in the show notes. And it's the thing about what the cost, if you like, of complete transparency is, and the complexity of what's being made apparent to whom and with what consequence. But in terms of just, I think it's almost about intent, isn't it? If you can state your intentions for the system, the detail. I mean, I think I'm trying to remember the article's detail, but I think it was around the fact that it's complicated. If you try to get too many people involved in making decisions about the complicated stuff, it starts to become impossible and it stops working and blah, blah, blah. And I get his point totally, but equally, one needs to have some sense of what the purpose is of what the data is being done, what the purpose of the data being collected is. So even if that's a broad level of intent, we need a better way, I guess, of holding people to account.
Yeah, I suppose that there will emerge a new generation of contracts between readers and providers of services, between customers and providers of service, where you will not be, they will not be so unbalanced. You'll be able to say, okay, let's play this game together. I mean, and I'm not expecting Facebook or any of the big ones to change significantly, but even with Facebook, I actually feel that I'm getting a fair deal with Facebook. I mean, I enjoy Facebook. I use it to keep track of my friends and my family. I'm sharing some stuff on Facebook. I know that I give them some stuff. I know that they are trying to push stuff to me that I might or might not buy or read sooner or later. I appreciate that if I tell them a little bit more about me, they can give me a little bit more advice. To a certain degree, I'm willing to do that, but that's about it. I mean, I know what the deal is.
Yes,
but I never really negotiated this deal, and I think that the vast majority of users do not have this deal. Vast majority of users.
You know what the deal is until something like Cambridge Analytica happens, or what worries me most is that what seems like a fair deal or innocuous data in the constrained context of Facebook, suddenly the machine learning or the AI starts to put two and two together in a different system, different database, and begins to do social profiling and stuff that begins to, use, and this happens. The advertiser's data is used to make judgments about your employability or there are more constraints on the credit rating stuff nowadays, but The laws need to keep up with the fact that people can make use of this data to make some quite pernicious decisions about us, even if the means of collection feels relatively benign.
Yeah. I mean, from this point of view, I think that there was Facebook did behaved quite well when they revealed that big data breach they had, and they did it very, very quickly because of GDPR. But the fact that Facebook actually did respect GDPR regulations, to the point that they went public with something even without knowing exactly what it was, but they were forced to go public, and they did. I think that
yes, that was a good sign. Yeah,
compared to Google, who basically announced a data breach yesterday that they had kind of been aware since 2015, and is impacting Google Plus users, all 19 of them. It's
well, they're still there. But that thing about it's interesting because there was a story recently about some tiny, size of the head of a pencil chip that the Chinese had managed to get onto. I think it was the motherboards or processors for servers. And the Bloomberg report, and this is a real challenge for journalists, which I don't think that many of them are up to, had sort of inflated the story. And it left people like Google and Apple coming back saying, well, no, actually, we did know about this, and it was in this constrained set of circumstances, and the consequences were much less drastic than you're trying to make out. And yes, there was a problem, but we dealt with it, sort of thing. And of course, that rambling misinformation around tech and the consequences of it, because, let's face it, bad news sells newspapers, and they're going to jump on anything that they think is a good story.
Well, and if you happen if the current administration happened to be imposing trade limit on China, that story plays right in their head. There's a whole bunch of reasons.
Yeah, and anybody who can get Apple in their headlines are going to just hit the jackpot sort of thing at the moment. So, yeah.
Well, the crazy thing about that story is that, pretty immediately, the reaction that I had been reading about the story, to say the least, it's exaggerated.
Yeah.
Today I read a post of one of the few people that are mentioned in that story, who is a security researcher, and is basically saying what they wrote in the story is a number of hypotheses that I gave them, like example of crazy stuff that is extremely unlikely to happen, and apparently they turned this into a story.
Yeah.
So again, what is interesting is that I was able to hear from the voice of somebody mentioned in the article saying, hey, no, wait a second, that's not what I said.
Which sort of leads us doubling back to podcasts. In the sense that, I
actually think that he said this in a podcast.
Right, so that's it. So, I increasingly, not that I get asked that often these days, but, if I get asked to sort of comment on something by a journalist, I almost always say no, unless I know them. And even when I've known them, sometimes I've got burned because they've had a story they wanted to tell, and I was just, cannon fodder for that story. And of course, blogs are less potent than they used to be, but certainly before blogs and podcasts, you didn't have the means of redress in that situation. So, and I know people worry about the truth and who's telling the truth, and shouldn't I respect and trust some institution that's been supposedly telling me the truth for the last 50 years as opposed to some guy in a podcast? Maybe. It depends.
All right, I think this is a pretty good way to wrap up this very thoughtful episode.
I reckon. We did our best, Paolo.
Yeah, well, one tries, right?
Yeah. I thought we were both trying. Thanks from both of us for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Goodbye.